So it's my great privilege to introduce you to Sylvia Young. Now, Sylvia was a very close friend of Max, and her talk today reflects the long association with him and his work. She received her musical education at the Royal College of Music, where she completed a piano diploma and degree. She subsequently held several head of department posts in various London schools and the International School in Geneva. In 1970, she went to Dartington Summer School for a holiday where she met Max and then became much more involved with him and the summer school. And it was there at Dartington in 1978 that she gave first performance of Max's 4 lessons for 2 clavichords, written for her and Bernard Roberts. In 1980, she gave up teaching and became an agent manager, initially for the composer Tim Schuster and Bernard Roberts. Other composers and instrumentalists followed, and after 10 years, she returned to teaching. After Max's death in 2016, she became a trustee of the Max Trust. So Sylvia will, as you can see there, be talking about music for children and amateurs, a personal view. And I'm going to stay here to press the button on the extracts. Thank you, Sylvia. I'm going to pop that there.
Okay. You're going to start.
Yes, that's the first one, isn't it?
That was the first of the 5 clay pictures, a piece which Max wrote for his school orchestra in Cirencester. Max and I started our teaching careers at roughly the same time in 1959. He was 3 years older than me, but had studied in Italy and been in America before he taught in Cirencester. I didn't actually meet him till 10 years later, but his revolutionary teaching methods made press headlines and gave all music teachers cause to think again. The style of Max's writing for Cirencester's choir and orchestra was partly reflected in his preoccupation with early music. That produced O Magnum Mysterium for choir and orchestra, and arrangements of pieces by Dowland, Bird and Tallis, along with a performing edition of 4 movements from Monteverdi's Vespers. The musical language of the 5 clay pictures is quite different. He also made arrangements of the orchestra, for the orchestra, of pieces by Satie, Mio and Stravinsky. One of Max's ex-Cirencester pupils spoke at his memorial concert. I quote, "I was lucky enough to be at Cirencester Grammar School when Max came to teach there. Cirencester Grammar School was a quiet, typical co-ed school. Then along came Max. He was young, dynamic and demanding. Suddenly, music was huge. After his arrival, we sang and played a terrifically high range of music: Janequin, Dunstable, Monteverdi, English Tudor madrigals and motets, Stravinsky, and Max's own music. We gave concerts at the Royal Festival Hall and at the Bath Festival with Menuhin, visiting artists including John Ogden and Elgar Howarth." Well, you would invite your friends, wouldn't you? Max instigated composition, making big demands on those interested, but never exceeding a pupil's capabilities. We didn't think his music was difficult. He made us perform it by sheer force of personality, with an intensity visible in those flashing eyes. After the publicity surrounding his work at Cirencester, most music teachers with sympathetic heads in grammar and the burgeoning comprehensive schools were able to work in a similar way. As Oliver Nusson said, writing about the 5 clay pictures in Tempo magazine, it is now clear that Maxwell Davies' experience at Cirencester made as great an impact on his own creative work as it did on school music in this country. Who knows where or whether Max would have taken inspiration for new children's works had it not been for the move to Orkney, the foundation of the festival, the dedication of Glenys Hughes and her husband until his untimely death. What a dramatic change of style that Orkney-induced inspiration enabled. He wrote in every genre imaginable: operas, choral music, songs, orchestral pieces, Wendy's wedding music being the last, solo piano pieces, and fiddle music for the Sunday fiddlers. My first visit to Kirkwall in 1978 began with the first performance of the 2 fiddlers. It beforehand, the performance was quite remarkable. It was funny, possibly the first of Max's gentle rants against TV, self-indulgence and pop music. Trolls, they were new. The 2 Fiddlers has a surprisingly enduring quality. It translates very well to other countries, especially Germany, where they have trolls of their own. The piece was soon done in Italy, near Florence, where Max struck up a lifelong friendship with Mauro Ceccanti, the leader of the Orchestra dei Maggio Musicali Florentino, but here the conductor. This friendship resulted in many new pieces for Mauro's group, Contempo Art Ensemble, and his 2 sons, Vittorio and Duccio, who was the violinist in that extract from the dances. The set designs for the 1980 Italian performance were by the Florentine artist Fernando Ferrulli. The subsequent owner, after Ferrulli's death, has given 4 of the designs to the Max Trust, and after a battle with Italian bureaucracy, they await display at the Royal Academy of Music. 1980 brought Cinderella, and my second visit to the festival. Max's libretto is very amusing and light-hearted, almost a pantomime.
Lighted and lonely, my thoughts are in a whirl. I've had to leave home to be an all-fair girl. I've to stay with widow Grandma, whom I have never seen. She has 3 grown-up daughters who are said to be quite big and good.
pair, Max going all middle class. The fairy godmother is a cat. The three ugly sisters get their just desserts by being married off to the appalling leaders of the armed services. There are 11 solo parts and a band of recorders, trumpet, percussion, string quintet with optional viola. This joyful piece should be performable by most schools. Basically, it's a sequence of songs in various styles. In June 1990, I saw the first performance of Dangerous Errand. This is a music theatre piece for 4 to 7-year-olds, in this case for Popdale School. This delightful piece tells of dangers on the way to the grocer's shop and how help is recruited from a dog, cat, and a sparrow. Max wrote, "I have not written for children quite so young before, and it presents quite special compositional problems, apart from the obvious ones to do with inventing material that strikes a balance between, on the one hand, attractiveness, approachability, and ease of learning from the young child's point of view, and on the other, makes sufficient musical demands. But you have to be careful. Small hands can't cope with certain notes in the middle of the recorder. Too many notes for the percussion players, etc. All very serious tests of a composer's imagination, and no easy option." Max had a keen eye for production values also. At one rehearsal, the lead, Pat, was obviously having trouble with her knicker elastic. Max said, "Remind me to tell her not to hitch up her knickers on stage." Everyone told her. The performances were charming, having the mildest of moral underlay. Be kind to everything and everyone. There are many other such works, not necessarily operas, such as Kirkwall Shopping Songs and 7 Songs Home. When Max was in Australia in 1965, he wrote and directed the first performance of the Shepherd's Calendar at the UNESCO Conference on Music and Education in Sydney. This is a substantial work for amateurs and children. It has an SATB chorus and a soloist in each section, wind and strings and 9 percussion groups. The instruments, including a football rattle, a scrubbing board, remember them? And a Japanese jingle, whatever that is. The text is in Latin, from the 13th century Goliard poets and the Liber Usalis, a jolly secular poem hailing the joys of spring. A Wall of Music, March 2014, was written to mark the restoration of the Royal Festival Hall organ. It opens with the words, "The wall has opened a wall of music." Seen 1,866 pipes. The children's voices are in unison. Brass players are professional, combining with younger players. At rehearsal, it was like marshalling an army. There were so many children from London, Gateshead, Manchester, and Birmingham, all conducted by the brilliant Jessica Collis. Everyone gets their moment, especially the trumpets and organ. It's not easy and highly effective. Amongst the many piano pieces written for friends are the following. For the last 18 months of his life, when Max was not in London having treatment, he was constantly visited by a neighbour, Elizabeth Coy, for whom he wrote 2 small piano pieces, one in particular for a birthday card for Liz, and the second piece is now entitled Nucalavi at the Rock. Then Max said he would try to use the melody in the opera The Hogboon, which he did. So the birthday card first. published pieces from 1977 under the collective title Stevie's Ferry to Hoy, there it is, were written for the daughter of his great friends Elizabeth and Archie Bevan. They are delightful short pieces which manage to encapsulate many of the technical requirements for future situations. Calm Water has the left hand playing over the right in the treble clef and back to the bass in quick succession. Choppy Seas has the left hand staccato throughout and the right hand legato, plus 2 against 3. In Safe Landing, the right hand is staccato, the left hand has the melody, alternating between trace, bass, treble and bass, and changes of time signature. And so to the last two major operas. Camilla Tonin was a joint commission from the Royal Academy of Music and the Juilliard in New York.
Camilla Tonin is an opera about young people taking political action and changing the course of history, and it's based on real life events, the lives of James Meredith, who was a kind of forerunner in the civil rights movement in Mississippi in 1962.
Down in Mississippi.
Students in China who were kind of brainwashed and turned against their parents in the Cultural Revolution of 1966 China. And then finally, it's also about a very brave and courageous group of students in Munich who wrote 6 pamphlets denouncing Nazism and were all executed in 1943.
Written over 2009 and 10 for young, hopefully soon to be professionals, the strands of the opera range from America, China and Nazi Germany. It combines Max's ability to mix genres and portray betrayal. It's a very powerful piece, executed brilliantly at the RAM, and Mac was equally happy with the Juilliard production. And finally, the Hogboon. I know I've omitted lots of other pieces in this vein, but I purposely nominated this talk as a personal one, as I was at the first performance of almost every piece I've listed. After the rigours of the composition, rehearsals, and performances in London and Rome of the 10th Symphony, I think the writing of the Hogboon was a relief. In his more mischievous moments, Max could almost make you believe in the benign spirits who needed feeding every night, plus the defeat of the wicked monster, resulting in another wedding, all reminiscent of Cinderella with much larger forces. When Max brought the libretto down to London, a student was deputed to photocopy it, and it was given to anyone who stood still long enough. He brought the manuscript down in September 2015 to be delivered to the publishers. On Thursday, September the 24th, he got up very early to put the finishing touches to the score. When we returned from the hospital, he sent me out for a bottle of champagne, which we finished before lunch, where the manuscript was delivered to Shotts. As many of you know, after December 2015, a series of unfortunate coincidences meant that Max stopped his treatment for just too long and didn't resume it while there was still time. I kept saying, but you won't see the Hogboon, and the answer was, oh no, maybe not. My view is not conclusive, but I think he decided that enough was enough, as he knew the consequences of stopping his treatment, and he died almost to the day of his unconscious prognosis. He'd said more than an adequate goodbye to his public at the end of the Hogboon, and although he went on working as long as he could hold a pencil, he knew he wouldn't finish the string quartet. I may not be able to read this last paragraph, but I'll try. The night before he died, someone, I think it was Ian, who was the fiddler on the shore of the second violin concerto, had rigged up a loudspeaker to the phone so that Max could hear. So I was able to say goodbye to him. I tried to be cheerful. That's what he would have expected from me. Not at all easy, knowing that 45 years of generous access to the man and all his music would be over. Thank you.
Personal view, as it says there, but you know, you were so close to Max, and you said yourself, you went, went to all of these, the
yes.
performances of all the pieces that you mentioned there. I was at the whole crew, and
yes, it was packed and terrific. Yes, yes.
One of the things that impresses me so much about Max the man is that when he was writing for children or amateurs, he took it he approached the project in every sense just as seriously as he did for the more serious commissions.
And none of it is easy.
None of it's easy.
The Two Fiddlers is definitely not easy.
No. So, and that's all the way through. And you mentioned Cinderella, and he was writing Cinderella, Richard, wasn't he, at the same time as which piece?
Well, Lighthouse.
Lighthouse.
I think what was happening is he finished the score of Lighthouse and he started Cinderella.
Yes.
Because he says at one point that it wasn't any more schizophrenic when writing one or the other, but I think actually they were, they were separate, yes, but they are slightly separate.
But he always had that sense, didn't he, of taking taking very seriously writing for amateurs.
Yes.
In your discussions with him, did that come across?
Yes, I mean, he always went to rehearsals, and even, there was a whole day, I seem to remember, of fiddling. What's the concert hall in Bournemouth? Portsmouth? No, whatever, near Poole. The Lighthouse, yes. So there was a whole day of all these children, some of them the Sunday fiddlers, and he just sat through it all as though it was, Beethoven's night. I mean, he seriously. I mean, I don't say he enjoyed every minute of that, but it was always serious. And it's quite different because clearly he was a much more sort of serious and slightly formidable character at Cirencester. But when he got to Orkney, all these little kids and all of this fun that evolved from it all just got to him. He just loved it. I mean, he always went to rehearsals and everything. I mean, it's... And, we'd go on the bus with the kids and the thing to rehearsals and from the town, because they all came from the town, Yes, I don't think there was any doubt that he thought it was a work of art like anything else.
Are there any questions for Sylvia? Sally?
Well, I just wanted to, it sort of reminds me of Fencer.
You'll have to tell me what she's saying because I can't hear.
Oh, right. It reminds me, Sylvia, of Fencer, who had the same...
Yes, exactly.
And who, in Montepulciano, was fighting to keep the children engaged.
Yes.
And staying in Montepulciano, like Max was trying to keep the community going in Kirk.
I mean, it's
what was very serious.
But I mean, it's a principle not to be overlooked, isn't it? If you don't engage young people, where are you going? Where's the next generation of listeners? It's something which we appear to have lost. I mean, and certainly in state schools, and it's just criminal because not all composers are suited to doing that kind of thing. I mean, Richard Rodney Bennett was another one who. He didn't write so much stuff as Max did, but when he did, it was, mightily powerful. All the King's Men and all those things. But no, it should be done, And I mean, it annoys me that more and more of these things aren't done. I mean, I mean, Cinderella in particular is perfectly right. It is done abroad sometimes, but not necessarily by schools. You couldn't, I mean, when I was teaching in 65 to 70 in a state comprehensive school where the head was enthusiastic and money was being thrown at those schools, we did Noah's Flood, obviously, did the first London performance of Malcolm Williamson's The Happy Prince, and that needed, and then we did A Mile and the Night Visitors. That needed an orchestra of 40, and I didn't have to get anyone in. I had an orchestra of 40. I mean, it was a big school, but I don't think you'd find that now. And it's...
I've just been to the Music for Youth prom, which, I mean, it was a major undertaking after COVID to get anything on at all. Albert Hall absolutely packed, not a note of classical music. It was all pop songs, arranged pop songs, all, the entire evening.
And although, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Who spoke, at Max's memorial concert. Although he might have been exaggerating, I think that if you do have enough personality, you can make people sing things which everybody else thinks is difficult. Because you don't say that. You just say, here it is, and this is how it goes, and let's get on with it. And I mean, Max had that terrific support from Glenys, of course, but even so, it could be done.
It wasn't just Orkney, was it?
No.
The experience being a teacher himself.
Yes, of course. Yes, and that's what I'm saying about. I mean, as I say, he might have been Neil might have been exaggerating, but that they didn't find it difficult. But there's a video of Max. Playing something of his own. It's way out esoteric and whatever. And these kids are just sitting there. Yes, that Morissette program. Yes, with what's his name. Yes, yes. The contrast is wonderful, except, of course, Dudley was a very clever musician. But hence Beethoven, the encore, Beethoven encore. It can be done.
Yes. That monitor program.
That's hilarious, isn't it? Yes, absolutely hilarious. Sorry, Richard.
I did mention Cinderella early on, that Geoffrey King's pantomime called Cinderella.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Geoffrey King did write
Yes.
Cinderella
Yes.
3 years earlier. But was there not a performance of Cinderella done by a German company, totally without humour? Do you remember this?
Oh. Yes, there was.
Sister's Street or something.
Yes, there was something. Yes. Max would have laughed that off, I think.
Okay, so I thought it would be really nice to end the conference to invite Sylvia, Richard and Sally. And for those of you who don't know Sally, it's my great honour to introduce Sally Groves, MBE. Sally was Creative Director, London of Shocked Music, where she was responsible for much of the firm's contemporary music catalogue until June 2014. And in 2012, she received the prestigious RPS Leslie Boozy Award for outstanding contribution to the furthering of contemporary music in Britain. And Sally serves on the Ray Vaughan Williams Trust, the Michael Tippett Musical Foundation, and the Vaughan Williams Charitable Trust. She is also on the advisory board of the Institute of Musical Research, University of London. She was a member of the board of the Music Publishers Association and was given their gold medal in 2014. And Sally is the daughter of the distinguished conductor Sir Charles Groves, an individual who did much to promote the orchestral music of Max. Sally is currently chair of the Max Trust and is Max's musical executor. So like Sylvia, she too was a very close friend of Max. So who better to speak about Max and as we remember him in this talk. Now, the three panelists here only know the first question, and I sent this to them. I've got a list of questions here. I'm hoping that the discussion will unfold organically, but I have got a list of prompts, but they don't know the questions I'm going to ask them. So this is certainly not scripted, apart from this first question. So as I mentioned this morning, masks and mask play feature prominently in Max's works, whether that's in connection with stylistic masks, symbolic masks, or issues associated with personal identity. And I've got a quote from Agatha Christie here, which I thought was appropriate. "The human face is, after all, nothing more nor less than a mask. And underneath is the primitive human man or woman." And it's also interesting that David Pountney, who collaborated with Max on several operas and music theatre pieces, he stated that Max could be opaque and sometimes whimsical, but behind each of his facades was a tough and committed campaigner, a passionate maker of music and theatre, and a vastly generous human being. So in this discussion, I want to focus on Max the man, the human being, and ask all of my panellists here to respond to the following initial question. Who was the real Peter Maxwell Davies? And when addressing this question, I want them to outline how many years they've known Max for, how they first met him, and how their friendship developed. So I've got a microphone here because... Hope it's working. Yes, it certainly is. So who would like to go first? Sylvia? No, we just had Sally.
Are we allowed to take our
Yes,
masks?
when we're talking, we're allowed to take masks off.
Hello, everybody. Can you... Yes? Well, I first met Max in Liverpool when my dad was the conductor of the Royal Liverpool Phil, and he did several works of Max, Sandy and Harry, including St Thomas Wake, famously, and At the Proms. So I would have been 16, 17, I suppose, then. Also, his first publisher was my publisher, Shot. He was then inveigled away by Britain to join Boozy and Hawkes. And then, of course, not one publisher could cope with the output. So then Chester's was brought in. And then finally, he came back to Shot, which was, for me, a real, just a blessing. It started because my dad died, 92, and he had been with the BBC Northern, as it was then called, when Max was in Manchester and submitted works to be performed on Children's Hour. And Violet Carson, who later went on to have a separate career, was then presenter on Children's Hour, and she gave these scores to Father to look at, and he thought they were terrific, so that Max came in. So Max had always had this lovely memory of my dad, and then later, of course, with performances of St Thomas Wake and various things. So he decided he would write a work in memory of my dad. And my mother was very, very, very deep in grief. She was, far away somewhere. But I told her that Max was writing this piece for her, and she said, "Oh, how nice, And then Judy Arnold, who was then his agent, rang in great excitement, as she always did, to say, it's finished. And would Shot like to publish it because it's got this personal relationship with your dad? So that's how Max came back into Shot, which was so lovely. But the sweet thing was that Max called it Sir Charles, his Pavan. So I relayed this to my mother, who was still very far away, and I said, "Mum, it's going to be called Sir Charles, his Pavan." And she said, "How nice," she said. "I wonder which pub he had in mind." Because my dad was a real pub man, and I don't think there was any pub in Liverpool he didn't know, and certainly not in London. So that's how I know Max. And I think that nobody really knew Max or the whole of Max. I defy anybody. Sylvia is the person who will have known him best through simply being with him, where there was no pretense. Max used masks, didn't he, Sylvia, for very specific purposes. And I think the only thing I would say is that betrayal went very deep with Max. And sometimes he would use a mask to mask betrayal. But I mean, it was the one thing he really, really couldn't bear. And I think he used masks sometimes to protect himself, and sometimes, as David partly said, to campaign and all the other things, and the official master of the Queen's music and all that. But he was an extraordinary, but you did feel excited to be with him. You did feel kind of good.
Well, my first encounter with Max was 1973. Glasgow had a series of Musica Nova Concerts, that's what it was called, and that was the first performance of Stone Litany, along with some Ligeti. There's some stories behind that as well, but not for Max, but for Ligeti. Of course, I was with Stephen Arnold, who taught at Glasgow at that point, because Stephen had been a pupil of Max's at Cirencester and had a lot of connection with Max. And Stephen had the sketches for the second Taverner Fantasia, a photocopy of them, rescued with the little burning bits at the top by Max from the fire in Dorset. So that was the first time, and you might have seen, if you've been on our Facebook page, I've got a picture of Max from that time showing Alexander Gibson how to play the wine glasses in Stone Litany. It's interesting. Alexander Gibson was famous for conducting in circles.
Yeah. Oh my God.
The second time, which he must have got from the wine glasses, I think. The second time was we in Bedfordshire. I was director of music at Sixth Form College there, and they had a performance of 8 songs from Mad King scheduled in Bedford, and they had a masterclass with Max in progress, but it fell through. And so we were doing the carols from Magnum Mysterium as it happened. So Max came down, and that was the second time. I remember him rehearsing a choir, not very well, but I do have a recording of that performance. I can't listen to it. I can't bear to listen to it because I didn't have a great choir. I'd only just taken them over. I had made a mistake, of course. When I decided to do a PhD, I was going to do it on Max's music, but I realised that everybody was looking at Max's music, and I didn't have more to say. As it turned out, I might have had more to say, which is why I got interested in the sketches. And from that point onwards, I had not a great deal of contact with Max personally, but one of the best ones was I turned up at his Edinburgh flat to talk about the symphonies. This was before the volume, the Max volume. And he gave me the sketches to take away with me of the 4th, 5th, and 6th symphonies. I mean, that's not typical of Max. I mean, he didn't know half the, didn't really know me that well. And I obviously got photocopies of them, and then I wrote the article, which is in the book. And I returned them to him, saying, I didn't know what to say to him, because thanks wasn't really good enough for having given me these sketches. I think I said something inane, like I couldn't work out what musical significance the coffee stain had in the 4th Symphony. But anyway, since after that, I attended a number. I was at the number 11 bus in 1984, and I also remember a very interesting performance in Liverpool of St Martin of St Magnus, which was done at not the university, but the one that's Stephen.
Yes, that one, Pope.
That one, yes.
That's right.
Yes, which was a really interesting performance of us. So that's my kind of connections, early connections.
just add that along with betrayal, he was an incredibly loyal person. He gave his friendship, he gave his loyalty, and he gave his trust. And I was talking with Alexander Gurr yesterday, and in Cambridge, we were there together, and he said that just before Max died, they were talking on the telephone, and Max said, "I've still got the picture by your mum of you, Sandy, on my piano." And that's a long friendship. And that's, I think, loyalty was incredibly important.
Yeah. Do you want to go long?
No.
So I think I said I first met Max in 1970. My second husband was a colleague of William Glock, and he suggested he said, "Go to Dartington, you'll enjoy it." And if any of you have ever been there, and in those days, it was extremely friendly. You had a job to tell the amateurs from musicians unless you knew them. And so Max was sort of outstandingly friendly. He was then just doing the composition classes. This was long before he became director. And we just were probably at the pub, where else, struck up a chat, and it just went on from there. Never changed. That first meeting was established a friendship which never changed. I think it was that year or the next one where he regaled me with how he'd broken his tooth. Yes, it must have been the next year, because he hadn't really moved into Bunatoon on Hoy then. But he'd broken a tooth, but he couldn't go to the dentist. He couldn't go to the dentist till he next came to London. And so he had stuck the half a tooth back in with araldite. Now, can you imagine? And it's true. So it was sort of, that sort of level. I mean, the very thought. And actually, Max was extremely dexterous with his fingers, because much later, when he was ill and really had to give in to having hearing aids, I thought he would never use them because they were so small and fiddly. I would have given them up immediately. But he could cope with them, put them in, took them out, changed the batteries. So he was extremely dexterous with his fingers. And it's got nothing to do with anything. But anyway, so that friendship, I think, was cemented by the fact that I was always a listening ear for his boyfriends, one after the other. And either got landed with them when they got thrown out, or only Colin didn't get thrown out. Well, it was the other way around. But so one after the other was always, could you just take hold of so-and-so? Could you just see that they get home all right? This sort of thing. Anyway, so there was all that side to it. And so Max had a temper which vented itself, small or large betrayals, things that went wrong. But he never lost his temper with me, ever, because there was no need to. It's a different sort of relationship to having, it's like your own relationships with whichever, male or female. That creates tension, but there wasn't that kind of tension between us. He was very fond of my first husband and so on, So there was none of that. So there was never any reason to get cross. He got cross with other people, and it was like a flash of bad temper. He knew he had a bad temper. But really, I think what everybody wants to know is, why was there such a dichotomy in Max's life? And it comes from the fact that he was so different from his upbringing and parents, I think, never knew how to reconcile that because there was no way of ever knowing. And so that reconciliation he was never able to make, which caused some anguish in him, I think. And that's just a small way of all the things that you know, both of you are written into his music. But in everyday life, he was just like anybody else, you know. He was adept at getting other people to do things for him, but if it had to be done, he would do it. He was an excellent cook.
He loved women.
Yes, he did. He did like women, yes. I mean, he was very fond of you. He was, well, yes, exactly.
The green juice.
Yes, this neighbour for whom those pieces were... Elizabeth was always on a health kick. I don't know why she was always on a health kick. And they lived half the year there and half the year somewhere else. But she made this utterly appalling green juice.
Based on celery, which is always a mistake.
Well, but you see, I was saying to someone the other day, some people give off an aura of expecting to be victims and other people don't. She never gave it to me. Not even when I stayed there. Yes, tough.
I was a good girl. But Max drank it dutifully.
He did drink it, yes. He hated it, but he drank it. However, that was a sort of sign of... I mean, it was an appreciative sign that he appreciated everything else they did for him, because he hated Christmas. And I would say to him, what are you going to do? Lock the door. But of course he didn't lock the door because the neighbours came round with food and all that drink, so the door got unlocked pretty swiftly. I mean, that was towards the end on Sunday, not... you'd have been very silly to try and go to Bunatoon at Christmas unless you really believed the weather forecast. When I look back and I think that on Bunatoon, on Hoy, to get there, you had to go on Stevie's Ferry, and then you had to pray that the farmer would remember which ferry you were on. He took you the next 5 miles, and then it was a mile walk up a hill, which was not, you couldn't take a vehicle up there, there's no vehicular traffic. So you had to walk up there. He had his clavichord, his organ, his wine cellar, etc., etc. You know, everybody carried things up there, just as the guy said about singing his music, just by force of personality. Would you like to come for the weekend? And if so, would you like to carry a case of wine up to the thing? So, but, you know, he was, as Sally says, he was a very loyal friend. He always asked how you were. He always said, especially when he was ill and he came to London every weekend, he used to say, "Oh, thank God for a smiling face," when I met him off the train. And though I say it myself, I don't think he would have gone on having that treatment for so long had I not looked after him, because it began to be evident that he really didn't like it. So, well, nobody would have liked it. And I can see why he gave it up in the end. I don't know, Nick. What else can I say?
Well, have a break and have some more tea, because you've got a tickly cough, haven't you? I remember Max for his kindness. He was always very kind to me. Yeah. And that's up until just a year before his death. I mean, I got in touch with him. He gave me his personal number, and I rang that, and we arranged to meet in London at the RAM flat, Royal Academy flat, and Sylvia answered the door. This was January 2015, the year before he died, and that's the first time I've met you in person. And I went up and I was greeted. I was offered a glass of wine, which I declined because I was driving that day. But yes. And Max came in and I said, "How are you?" And he said, "Okay, I've just come from chemotherapy." And I said, You agreed to see me and you knew you were having chemotherapy?" He said, "Yes, of course." And we sat there and we had a lovely chat and I interviewed him. He gave me a photocopy of the Hogboon libretto.
Yes, you sat down. That was the mistake.
So it just goes, it was the mark of the man. So kind all the way to his death. I just want to ask you all, which of Max's works had an impact on you? Because I've already mentioned The Lighthouse. The Third Symphony for me had a huge impact, so much so that I ended up doing a PhD on it. But which Max work grabbed you? Richard?
Oh, that's easy. It was Stone Litany. It opens with that unison A played by the harp, and just dong, and then it ends with those wine glasses. I mean, it's just such a magical work. And there's so much in it. I was hooked. That was it. I did want to say something I didn't say. By the way, sorry. I found in the 76 notebook a pattern like squares done in the shape of a Christmas tree for Christmas. What I wanted to say was that he always replied. He was a really good correspondent, even when you weren't actually asking him to. When he got the article from me about Emmett Takes a Walk. I mean, he wrote to me twice about that, in fact. But the best one was when I cracked his alphabet. I wrote to him, "Dear Max," and then I continued the rest in his alphabet. I didn't want to tell Judy that I had done it because I thought Judy would be quite problematic, and that's why it's Judy Arnold. Judy Arnold is his former agent, and that's why it was published in America, because I didn't think Judy would actually find that out. I don't think she even knew that I did it actually in the end. But I wrote to Max, and he wrote back to me and told me that it had made him laugh. That was it. A postcard made me laugh. Oh yes. It was Stone Litany.
I said St Thomas Wake because it's such an extraordinary piece. But I did see Taverner, the first iteration, well, the only iteration at the Royal Opera House of Taverner, with Ben Luxon, was it, as the jester? No, who was it? No, it wasn't Ben Luxon. Yes, it was. Anyway, bloody hell, that was quite something.
It was, yeah.
Like nothing I'd ever seen before.
He took his poor mother. We were with his mother.
This is 1972.
Yeah. That was... I'd seen The Knot Garden at Covent Garden in 1970, which is also a life-changing experience because the production was so magical, incredible and new. And that was also what was true about Taverner, was that the production was just so extraordinary and swinging high above the stage. And you just felt the force, of that music. My God, it's forceful. Blows your head off, really. So, yeah. Fifth Symphony, for me, of all the symphonies. And the 10th, of course.
Yes, it's tear-jerking, the 10th. But I don't know. I mean, it's impossible. It's an impossible question. I'm always slightly overwhelmed with Vasali, and what the dancer does with it, and so on. I've seen.
I wish that was done more because that's
Yes, I like that very much. And then, of course, 8 songs because, Max was always at his most eloquent when he was cross. He very reluctantly went to a performance in the Rose Theatre in Kingston-on-Thames because Ollie Zeffman was doing it and had come to ask him and so on. So we're in the period when he was ill. So we went in a taxi and he could see, first of all, they put us in the front row. He could see from the stage that he wasn't going to like it because there was a bath on the stage. And he thought, hello, this is not the water. This is not the, no, it's not the famous Louis. It was actually a bath. I thought, oh no, this poor bloody singer's going to have to climb in and out of a bath, you know. Anyway, so he could see. He could also see the parts, and he could see that they were playing from old manuscript copies of his manuscript. And he said, why are they doing that? So I said, I think you'll find, we won't name names, but it's not been done properly. No. You want to try getting a set of ordinary parts?
Seriously, 8 songs from Lucy?
Yes. Don't tell anyone. Anyway, especially Janice. Don't tell Janice. Please don't tell Janice. Yes. Well, but this is quite recently, you know, before he died, they were playing from this. Anyway, so Ollie must have said to him, would you like to talk about it? And I've seen lots of performances of 8 songs. I have never heard such an explanation. The audience sat there with their mouth open. It was just amazing, his actual, you know, telling of how it, you know, what it all meant. And, you know, I never looked back. And of course, by that time, he was really fed up with it because it reminded him of those years you were talking about. I said, he used to say, I wish they'd do something else. You know, we went to Florence so many times because they'd got this singer who could do it, blah, blah. And he said, I wish they'd do something else. And I said, well, you know, they've only been kind. And he said, yes, but it makes me miserable. So one day I said to him, why does it make you miserable? And he said, just, you know, it reminded him of all those years when he wasn't sure. You know, everyone was so critical, and he wasn't sure if he was going to make it as a composer. And that would have killed him, of course, I think. Sorry.
No need to apologise. No, his pre-concert talks were just amazing, weren't they? You know.
Yes, always, but this was particularly insightful. You know, he was just so cross. He just thought, I'm going to tell him why I wrote it. You know?
Yeah. It wasn't recorded, was it? Yes, yeah. I'm just having a look at the time because I know we've only got 10 minutes or so left. I just want to turn towards the final years of his life, and as we all know, he had to endure several personal upheavals during that period, including Michael Arnold and all that, and of course Colin Parkinson, who we've already mentioned. Not to mention, of course, in late January 2013, he was diagnosed with aggressive leukemia. So remarkably, during this time, he continued to write. He wrote the 10th Symphony from his hospital bed. How on earth did he manage to continue to work under such conditions?
Well, he only worked at home. I mean, the fact that he got a pencil out to finish the Hogboon was very rare. He didn't try to work when he came. So I think all of those times, all of those 9 days every month for all that long time, what was going on in his head got written very quickly when he got home. Because I think that was his, you know, he heard things in his head and was ready to do them when he got home. He wasn't someone who jotted it down, you know, he did it. It would stay in his head, that's what I'm saying. He was just determined, Nick. He had a lot still to... There was a lot that he wanted to do, and he was determined to do it. You know, the 10th Symphony, I have to say, probably I would have to choose it. But I have to say, I'd never liked the singer in... well, it was in both places, but in Rome, otherwise, it was so moving. It wasn't true. I mean, it was moving in London too, but in Rome, Papano really went for it. And the chorus, of course, was professional, and it just made that slight edge. It was... Anyway, how did he go on working all that time? Just sheer determination. Otherwise, he might have done... I mean, the oncologist gave him that option. The, 2 weeks before his 80th birthday, and said, you can choose. You can either have this treatment or you can go home and you'll be dead in 3 months. And he didn't make his mind up right away. He spent that week in Livorno being ill, and I had to get antibiotics and things for him. And he, I don't even know that was a game changer, but I think he foresaw that, that wouldn't be able to write anything. And so that was what made him say, oh, well, you better ring him up. I mean, okay. That's just what he said on the day of his birthday. So it was just sheer determination. It was there to be written.
Thank you. And the last question, how would you sum up Max's legacy? I'm sure you've all got a different perspective on this. Let's start from an academic point of view, shall we?
Thanks, Nick. I don't know how to answer that, really, because the legacy is so extensive and profound, and we've only, I mean, you and I have only really scratched the surface in some ways of what's going on. I mean, once upon a time, we used to think it was the way in which he developed certain techniques and so on. And then we became more aware of the fact that there was a human being really bigger, an iceberg underneath these notes. And this is why I think that the legacy is going to be that we will understand him better. But then I think we'll appreciate the legacy will be for his bigger works will grow over time. I think at the moment there isn't the kind of critical reception. Well, we've been talking about that, about the lack of musical, things happening in schools and so on, and audiences getting unused to listening to anything other than pop. He said, taking a deep breath before he said that. I mean, sometimes there's this value, but sometimes there's a broader perspective. So I think the legacy is going to take some time, but I suspect that there are works, the main works, are the ones which have to be yet reevaluated, in my view.
I agree. Way too soon. But what always I remember is that really, in this funny cut-off little island, contemporary music started after the war in Manchester with Sandy, Harry and Max. And we should never forget that. It was so parochial before then, and composers like Michael Tippett had to fight against that, and it was awful. And they knew what was going on in Europe, and they wanted to find out, and they all found out in their different ways. But that's what you guys have to thank them for that. You really do. That's all I'd say.
There's a note in the diary, 1 page. Down with Darmstadt.
Oh my God.
They felt the same, but they wouldn't have been the same without Darmstadt.
No. Well, frankly, I have no idea, but Sally is right. I mean, of course, as you will have gathered, my legacy is a personal one. But I can't see that all these things will not keep reappearing, because if you'd think that the early pieces, which everybody thought was so difficult, like the trumpet piece for John Wallace and so on, they sight read it for auditions now at the Academy or wherever. And so I can't believe, I mean, your generations will find that music easy, and hopefully then it will get done a lot more. I hope. I won't be here to see it, but I hope.
Well, thank you. I think we better wrap it up there. We haven't really got time for any questions, but... Oh, don't worry about George. I'll Before you all go though, just like to thank you all for coming today. It's been a really fascinating day, and that was a really fascinating conversation. So before we applause, we're going to take this conversation to the pub. So if you're up for it, we're going to the Pen and Wig, which is a 10-15 minute walk or so up into central Cardiff. It's not quite in central Cardiff, but it's on the way, and then we can decide what we're going to do from there on. But you're all very welcome to come, and so thank you so much again. So let's have an applause.
Thank you, Nick. It's my pleasure.